8 miles east of St. Louis, Missouri, there's a shopping mall. Next to the mall, there's a highway. And beneath both, there's a secret most Americans never learn: the remains of the largest city in pre-Columbian North America, Cahokia. At its peak around 1100 AD, Cahokia was larger than London, more populated than Paris, more advanced than anything in Europe at the same time, a metropolis of 10,000 to 40,000 people, covering 6 square miles, built entirely by hand. Then it vanished. Here's what's strange about Cahokia. It wasn't hidden, it wasn't buried deep. The mounds are still visible today. Yet, when European colonists arrived in the 1600s and 1700s, they found the mounds and had no idea what they were. The indigenous peoples living nearby couldn't explain who built them. The knowledge was completely gone. Entire academic debates erupted over whether Native Americans could have built something so sophisticated. Some colonists proposed the mounds were built by a lost white race. Others suggested Vikings. Others imagined mythical civilizations. The truth was simpler and more disturbing. Native Americans had built it, then forgotten it. Cahokia wasn't a village. It was a planned city. The central feature, Monks Mound, 100 feet tall, covering 14 acres at its base, larger than any Egyptian pyramid by footprint, built entirely from hand-carried earth, basketful by basketful over decades. No wheels, no draft animals, no metal tools, just human labor, organized, coordinated, sustained over generations. Surrounding Monks Mound, 80+ additional mounds. Some burial mounds, some platform mounds. Some ceremonial, between the mounds, residential areas, craft workshops, agricultural fields, plazas, a functioning urban center in the heart of North America, 400 years before Columbus. Cahokia emerged around 600–700 AD as a small settlement. Around 1050 AD, something changed. Population exploded, construction accelerated. The city transformed from village to metropolis within a single generation. By 1100 AD, Cahokia was at its peak. Then, around 1200 AD, decline began. By 1350 AD, the city was abandoned. Empty, but silent. The population dispersed. Within a few more generations, nobody remembered who built it. The people who built Cahokia are called the Mississippian culture. They weren't a single tribe. They were a civilization spanning the Mississippi River Valley and beyond. They had agricultural surplus, primarily corn, trade networks spanning from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes, hierarchical social structure, religious centers with astronomical alignments, craft specialization, urban planning. By any definition, this was an advanced civilization, yet most Americans have never heard of it. Why don't we learn about Cahokia in school? Why isn't it celebrated like Machu Picchu or the Egyptian pyramids? Part of the answer is uncomfortable. It challenges the narrative that North America was an empty wilderness before Europeans arrived. If Cahokia existed, if a city larger than London existed in North America in 1100 AD, then the story of discovery and settlement becomes more complicated. Indigenous peoples didn't just hunt and gather. They built cities, created civilizations, rose and fell just like old world cultures. That's inconvenient for certain historical narratives. So Cahokia gets footnoted, minimized, forgotten. But the deeper mystery isn't why we forgot Cahokia. It's why the people who built it forgot it. How does a civilization of 40,000 people abandon their city and lose all memory of building it within a few generations? What happens to a society that collapses so completely that even oral history can't preserve what was lost? Cahokia is asking that question, and we're still trying to find the answer. Monks Mound is 100 feet tall. It covers 14 acres at its base. It contains approximately 22 million cubic feet of earth, all of it carried by hand, in baskets, one load at a time. Let's calculate what Monks Mound required. 22 million cubic feet of earth weighs approximately 1.5 billion pounds. If each worker carried 50 pounds per trip, that's 30 million trips. If 1,000 workers made 10 trips per day, that's 10,000 trips per day. 30 million trips, 10,000 trips per day, 3,000 days. That's over 8 years of continuous labor just for one mound. And Cahokia had 80+ mounds. But volume isn't the only challenge. Monks Mound isn't just a pile of dirt. It's an engineered structure. Different layers of soil were used deliberately. Clay layers for water resistance, sandy layers for drainage, alternating composition for stability. The builders understood soil mechanics. They knew that a 100-foot mound would collapse without proper engineering. They built it to last. And it has, for over 900 years. Moving 1.5 billion pounds of earth requires organization. Workers need to be fed, housed, coordinated. Supervisors need to direct placement. Engineers need to verify construction. This isn't spontaneous labor. This is planned, managed, sustained effort. Cahokia had to have labor recruitment systems, food surplus for non-agricultural workers, management hierarchy, long-term planning capacity. These are hallmarks of advanced civilization. The Mississippians had no metal tools, no wheels, no draft animals. They had stone hoes for digging, woven baskets for carrying, wooden posts for construction, human muscle for everything else. With these primitive tools, they built a monument larger than any Egyptian pyramid by footprint. The Great Pyramid of Giza is impressive, but it was built with copper tools, organized labor systems, and, possibly, advanced engineering techniques. Monks Mound was built with stone and baskets. Archaeological evidence suggests Cahokia transformed from village to city in a single generation. Around 1050 AD, small settlement. By 1100 AD, major metropolis with massive construction projects underway. 50 years, one human lifetime. How do you mobilize tens of thousands of workers that quickly? How do you feed them, house them, organize them? Something catalyzed Cahokia's explosion. A leader, a religious movement, a technological innovation, we don't know what. Cahokia wasn't random sprawl. The city was laid out in a planned grid. Central plaza aligned to cardinal directions. Mounds positioned according to astronomical alignments. Residential areas organized by district. Craft workshops clustered together. This requires surveying. Planning authority to implement designs. Someone drew up plans for Cahokia before construction began. West of Monks Mound, archaeologists discovered post holes arranged in circles. These were wooden post circles, wood henges, aligned to solar events. At the equinoxes, the sun rises directly over Monks Mound when viewed from the Woodhenge Center. This isn't coincidence. This is deliberate astronomical alignment. The Cahokians tracked celestial events, used them for calendar, for ceremony. For planning, Cahokia sits in a floodplain. The Mississippi and Missouri rivers flood regularly. Building a city there requires water management. Archaeological evidence shows drainage systems, elevated construction areas, controlled flooding for agriculture. The Cahokians engineered their environment, shaped it to their needs. What enabled such rapid construction? Religious fervor, a charismatic leader promising divine favor, new agricultural techniques, a corn variety that dramatically increased yields, immigration, populations from surrounding areas converging on Cahokia. All have been proposed. None fully explains the explosion. Something happened around 1050 AD that transformed Cahokia from village to city. And whatever it was, it sustained construction for 150 years, then stopped. Cahokia wasn't just big, it was complex. A stratified society with rulers, priests, craftspeople, farmers, and laborers. Trade networks spanning a continent. Religious practices involving human sacrifice. And a level of organization that rivaled contemporary European kingdoms. Archaeological evidence reveals clear social stratification. Elite burials with massive grave goods, jade.copper, shell beads, elaborate pottery. Commoner burials with minimal accompaniments. Some individuals buried in mass graves, possibly sacrificial victims. this isn't an egalitarian society. This is a civilization with rulers and ruled. At the top, likely a paramount chief, a ruler with religious and political authority, living atop Monks Mound, elevated above all others physically and symbolically, controlling trade, directing construction, mediating with the divine. The chief's power would have been immense, absolute in many ways. One burial mound revealed Cahokia's dark side. Mound 72 contained a central burial of an important male on a platform of 20,000 shell beads. Nearby, the remains of over 270 individuals. Many were young women buried in mass graves. Some showed signs of sacrifice. This wasn't warfare. This was ritual killing. When the ruler died, others were killed to accompany him. Servants, wives, retainers, sacrificed to serve in the afterlife. The mass graves in Mound 72 show patterns. 53 young women in one pit, similar ages, similar health, killed simultaneously. Men and women in another pit, some decapitated, some with hands removed. This is organized, ritual sacrifice on a significant scale. Not warfare casualties, not epidemic victims. Deliberate killing. Cahokia had a religious system that demanded human life. Cahokia was a trade hub. Goods found at Cahokia came from copper from the Great Lakes, 500-plus miles north, shell from the Gulf of Mexico, 700-plus miles south, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, 1,000-plus miles west, mica from the Appalachians, 500-plus miles east. This isn't local trade. This is continental commerce. Cahokia sat at the center of a network spanning thousands of miles. The city had specialized craftspeople, shell workers creating beads and gorgets, copper workers making ceremonial objects, potters producing distinctive Cahokian ceramics, flint knappers making tools and weapons. These weren't part-time artisans. They were full-time specialists supported by agricultural surplus. That requires economic organization distribution systems. Market mechanisms, everything depended on corn. Maize agriculture had reached the Mississippi Valley centuries earlier. But around 1000 AD, a new variety appeared. More productive, more reliable. This agricultural revolution enabled population growth. Enabled surplus, enabled cities. Without corn, no Cahokia. Cahokia wasn't just a political capital, it was a religious center. Pilgrims likely traveled from across the region to participate in ceremonies. The astronomical alignments, the massive mounds, the elaborate rituals all suggest Cahokia was a sacred place, a connection point between human and divine. Cahokia's influence extended far beyond its walls. Mississippian culture spread across the southeast and Midwest. Smaller mound centers appeared, satellite cities, trade posts, religious outposts. From Oklahoma to Florida to Wisconsin, Cahokian influence is visible. This wasn't an isolated city. This was the capital of a civilization. How many people lived at Cahokia? Conservative estimates, 10,000, 15,000 $. Moderate estimates, 20,000, 30,000. Aggressive estimates, 40,000 plus. Even the conservative estimate makes Cahokia one of the largest cities in the world at that time. Larger than London, 10,000, 15,000 in 1100 AD. Comparable to Paris to major European centers. In the middle of North America. Built without metal tools, Cahokia proved something uncomfortable. Native North Americans built cities, created hierarchies, developed trade networks, practiced complex religion. They weren't primitive. They weren't simple. They were civilized. In every sense that word applies to old world cultures. And then they collapsed, just like Rome, just like the Maya, just like every other advanced civilization. Rise, peak, collapse, forgetting. The pattern repeats. By 1100 AD, Cahokia was booming. Monks Mound dominated the skyline. Plazas were packed. Trade flowed in from thousands of miles away. Ritual fires burned through the night. Then, within about 250 years, it was over. By around 1350 AD, the city was abandoned. No one lived on Monks Mound. No more Woodhenge ceremonies, no more 40,000-person metropolis. Just empty mounds and silence. Core samples taken from around Cahokia show. Increasing erosion. Pollen shifts. Signs of deforestation and soil exhaustion. To feed tens of thousands of people, Cahokia's farmers cleared forests and expanded cornfields. Short-term, food surplus, booming population. Long-term, topsoil washed away in floods. Fields became less productive. Forests vanished, changing local climate and wildlife. Archaeologists see more flooding evidence in later layers. Trash pits filling with lower quality food remains. Signs of nutritional stress. The land that made Cahokia powerful may have helped destroy it. Tree rings and sediment cores from across North America show climate instability between 1200 and 1350 AD. Colder winters. Drier summers. Unpredictable rainfall. A few bad harvests in a small village is a problem. A few bad harvests in a city of 20s and 40,000 is a disaster. Food shortages lead to malnutrition, disease vulnerability, social unrest, migration. Cahokia's size became a liability when the climate turned. Archaeologists have found defensive palisades built around the central precinct in later phases, signs of hastily constructed fortifications, evidence of burning in some residential zones. You don't build walls unless you feel threatened. Possibilities. Internal factional conflict. Uprisings against elites. Attacks from rival groups angry at Cahokia's dominance. As resources shrank and inequality grew, the social contract that held Cahokia together may have snapped. Dense urban centers are ideal for infectious disease spread, contaminated water, poor sanitation. Cahokia's population density, trash pits, and close housing created perfect conditions for outbreaks. We don't have written plague records, but skeletal evidence hints at childhood stress, nutritional deficiency, possible waves of illness. Stack that on top of food stress, climate instability, political tension, and you have a civilization under immense pressure. Cahokia didn't explode in a single catastrophic event. It unraveled. Families left first. Villages on the outskirts emptied. Trade slowed. Rituals lost power. Construction stopped. Palisades fell into disrepair. By the time Europeans arrived centuries later, the land was dotted with mounds but no memory. The people who'd left became ancestors of later tribes: Shawnee, Osage, Pawnee, others of the eastern woodlands. But their stories about Cahokia, if any survived, faded. The city became just old earthworks, its name forgotten. When French explorers and later American settlers moved through the Mississippi Valley, they found the mounds. They did not find the story. Indigenous groups living in the area in the 1600s, 1700s had only vague traditions, if any, about who built them. Oral history had broken. European colonists looked at the mounds and assumed, the Indians we see now couldn't have built this. A lost race must have done it. Maybe the Israelites, maybe Vikings, maybe some vanished white civilization. These ideas weren't fringe. They were mainstream in the 18th and 19th centuries. This served a purpose. If Native Americans hadn't built the mounds, then Europeans weren't displacing a sophisticated civilization. They were simply taking land from savages who had squatted on the ruins of a superior, mysterious mound builder race. It made conquest easier to justify. Only in the late 19th and 20th centuries did archaeologists prove the mounds were definitely built by ancestors of Native Americans. The Mississippian culture was indigenous, complex, and urban. Cahokia was the center of that world. By then, though, the myth of primitive North America had already shaped textbooks. The idea of an empty, uncivilized continent was baked into national identity. Cahokia's reality didn't fit the story, so it stayed small in the narrative. Today, most Americans can name Egypt's pyramids. Many know about Rome, Athens, and Machu Picchu. Almost none can tell you what Cahokia is. Yet, at its peak, Cahokia rivaled or exceeded the population of many European cities. Its main mound is larger in base area than the Great Pyramid. Its influence stretched over half a continent. Why isn't that common knowledge? Because it challenges the idea that complex urban civilization belongs to the Old World. It forces acknowledgement that North America had advanced societies long before Europeans. It complicates the myth of bringing civilization to a wilderness, adding insult to injury. Much of ancient Cahokia lies under highways, housing, and parking lots. Centuries of farming flattened smaller mounds. Modern development erased archaeological layers before they were even documented. We literally built over a lost metropolis and then forgot it existed. Monks Mound and a few dozen mounds remain as protected parkland, but most of the ancient city is gone. Why does this matter? Because how we tell history tells us who we are. If we ignore Cahokia, we teach that North America had no great cities before Europeans. We imply that advanced civilization is imported, not indigenous. We downplay the sophistication of native cultures. Cahokia proves that's false. But accepting that requires rewriting more than just a footnote. It requires rewriting the story of America itself. Cahokia isn't just about the past, it's about patterns. It's a mirror held up to our own civilization. Pattern 1. Rapid rise, sudden fall. Cahokia exploded from village to city in about 50 years. Our modern industrial civilization exploded in about 150. Both depended on exploiting resources at massive scale, transformed landscapes, and created dense urban centers vulnerable to shock. Both reached heights their ancestors couldn't imagine and assumed the boom would last. Cahokia shows peaks can be short, collapse can be quiet, and even great cities can disappear within a few generations. Pattern 2. Fragile memory. Cahokia's people left no known written records, mostly earthworks and artifacts. Within a few hundred years, the story of who they were was gone, even for their descendants. We are doing worse. Our knowledge is stored in digital formats that vanish without power. Our archives depend on stable institutions. If power failed globally for a century, how much of our history would survive? Probably less than Cahokia's did. Pattern 3. Erasing what's inconvenient. Cahokia was inconvenient for colonial narratives, racial myths, and national myth-making, so it was minimized. We do the same now with climate warnings, resource depletion studies, and historical evidence that contradicts comforting stories. We ignore what doesn't fit the narrative. Cahokia shows where that leads. Collapse first. Forgetting second. Myth-making third. Pattern 4. Building on shaky ground. Cahokia was built in a floodplain. Rich soil, but vulnerable. We're building global civilization on fossil fuels, fragile supply chains, and complex digital systems. The pros are unprecedented comfort and power. The cons are vulnerability to disruption and dependence on environmental stability. Cahokia didn't collapse because they were primitive. They collapsed because they built big on unstable foundations, then pushed their environment too far. Sound familiar? The question Cahokia leaves us with. Cahokia is asking one question. What do you think makes you safer from collapse than we were? Is it technology? More knowledge? Global scale? Or are those just bigger versions of the same gamble? New ways to overreach faster? New illusions of permanence? Cahokia says you can build massive, you can organize millions, you can align monuments to the stars, and still, your city can empty. Your name can be forgotten. Your story can collapse into mystery. Unless you deliberately preserve knowledge across collapses, respect for limits, and honest memory of what went wrong. Right now, we aren't doing that. We're repeating their pattern, just with higher stakes. Cahokia is not just America's lost city, it's a preview. Here's the detail that makes Cahokia genuinely unsettling. When Europeans arrived in the Mississippi Valley, the indigenous nations living there knew the mounds existed, used some as landmarks or sacred places, but often had no clear, detailed stories of who built the biggest ones or why. A megacity had vanished so completely that even its heirs weren't sure it was theirs. How do you forget a city of 40,000 people? It doesn't happen overnight. First, the elite structure crumbles, ritual centers lose authority, trade falters, people drift out to smaller towns. Then, children grow up hearing only fragments about the big place we used to live. Grandchildren hear even less. Great-grandchildren inherit almost nothing concrete, just those old mounds were made by people long ago. Within 3-5 generations, lived memory is gone, names are gone, specific reasons are gone. We built that becomes someone built that. Now stretch that over 300 to 400 years. Oral cultures can preserve memory for astonishing lengths of time, but they need stability, continuity, intact lineages of storytellers. Cahokia's world didn't have that after collapse. War, migration, disease, climate, stress. These break the chain. Stories narrow from who ruled, what they built, and why it fell, to long ago, powerful people lived here. Cahokia was erased twice. First, by its own collapse, by its people moving on, by generations of forgetting. Second, by colonial narratives, by historians who preferred the idea of a mysterious lost race over indigenous achievement, by decades of textbooks that treated North America as empty until Europe showed up. That's why, even today, most people know about Rome's fall, but few know anything about Cahokia's. Not because Cahokia was less important, but because it was less convenient. Imagine your entire city, millions of people, abandoned. Fast forward 400 years. Your descendants live nearby, but speak a different language and follow new leaders. Someone asks them, "Who built those ruined towers on the horizon?" And they shrug. People long ago. We don't really know. That's what happened at Cahokia. Cahokia is not just a lost city, it's a stress test for our assumptions about how memory works, how long complexity lasts, how permanent we really are. Cahokia proves advanced urban life can exist without metal, wheels, or writing as we know it. Massive, coordinated public works can be done with baskets and willpower, and cities can rise to world-class scale and fall into near-total obscurity. We believe our technology makes us immune to that kind of forgetting. Our data backups will preserve everything. Our global systems make us too big to truly fall. Cahokia is laughing at that, softly, from under a layer of grass. Picture a future visitor standing on a hill where your city used to be. They see fragments of concrete, twisted rebar, a few stone monuments. But without power to boot up servers or compatible hardware to read drives, most of what defines us now will be unreadable noise, exactly like Cahokia is to us, obviously advanced, obviously important, mostly unknowable. What Cahokia forces us to ask is not, how did they build it? But, how do you keep knowledge alive after collapse? How do you design memory for a future where your systems fail? We aren't building for post-collapse readability. We're not encoding long-term warnings in durable, simple forms. We're assuming there won't be a dark age. Cahokia is physical proof that there can be. The Mississippians at Cahokia altered rivers, cleared forests, and pushed their ecosystem hard. We're doing the same thing. The only real difference is scale. Their civilization was continental, ours is planetary. When they overreached, one region collapsed. If we overreach, the collapse is global. Imagine sunrise over Monks Mound today. Cars hum on the nearby highway. A modern city skyline glows in the distance. Now strip all of that away, leave only the earthwork, the sky, and the memory of a people who thought their world was permanent. That's how sure we should be about our own. Cahokia has already lived our story once. Rise fast, build huge. Overstretch, collapse. Forget. The only open question is, will we treat their ruins as a warning, or just another mystery we scroll past and forget?